Sefer Mishlei in the middle of Perek Tet Zayin, chapter 16, Pasuk Tet Zayin. Kino chokhma ma tov mecharutz uknot bina nivchar mikasef. How much better it is to get wisdom than gold. Charutz is fine gold. Uknot bina nivchar mikasef. And to get understanding is preferable to silver. The simple meaning of the pasuk is something that Shlomo Melech repeats many times in this Sefer Mishlei. How much more valuable is chokhmah, is wisdom, how useful it is in life. And this is not only for someone who's Jewish, even for someone who's not Jewish. It is something that is quite logical, that there are many times where money cannot help one, but the chokhmah might be able to help one. That's a simple understanding of this pasuk. This particular pasuk is perhaps also a continuation of the previous pasuk, which we discussed last week, on how to convince a king, how to appease a king. A king's anger is very dangerous. A king has a tremendous amount of control. And one way to appease the king is to admit the truth, to be righteous, in other words, to be on his good side. So Shlomo Melech pointed out that this anger, this powerful anger of a king, can be appeased through ish chacham, through wisdom. In other words, you can't always buy yourself out with money, but you may be able to buy yourself out with chokhmah. Someone who is chacham, who could apply his chokhmah to a difficult situation, he has a better chance. Even though it's true, money is something very powerful too. It helps a lot too. But apparently that's what he's trying to point out, that the chokhmah is even greater than money. Here, he's not just talking about any chokhmah. Obviously, the emphasis is always on chokhmat Torah. And there are various reasons why he emphasizes this, even though it may be obvious to us. It is not so obvious to many parents who would rather have their children go to college instead of a yeshiva. Even though it is a good thing to acquire a profession, to have a degree, it may be necessary sometimes, but that's not the ultimate tachlit, the ultimate goal of why we're here for. And one should recognize what is a true priority in a Jew's life. And it's not the miktsua, the profession, the money, because in the end, as we will see many, many times in Sefer Mishlei and in Kohelet, it's all mazal anyway. There are many poor lawyers, many doctors who are not so successful. On the other hand, there are many, many Persian Jews who don't speak a word of English and are making millions of dollars, right? I'm sure you know individuals like that. They don't know too much English, right? They came from Iran and they're millionaires. How do you explain that? It has nothing to do with their PhD. It has to do with mazal. So a lot of things, as we will see, is mazal. But how much chokhmah one acquires, how he behaves himself, does he refine his character or not? Is he a mensch, as we say in Yiddish, or not? That's up to him. So the chokhmah that we're talking about over here is a valuable chokhmah, valuable than any gold or silver, because this is the chokhmat Torah. Any chokhmah is valuable, but especially so the chokhmat Torah, which not only gives one direction in life, without it one cannot become a good person. We have a continuous battle with the Yetzer Hara, and if there's nothing to control our Yetzarim, our instincts, then we continue through life in an undeveloped, I guess, how would you say, in an undeveloped stage, not fully mature, not maximizing our potential. The way to maximize one's potential is through acquiring this chokhmah that will hopefully guide him and help him to elevate himself, to refine his character, and to do the mitzvot. And that is why this is a priority. This is more important than anything else. Priority number one. Mesilat Yesharim Sur Mera Shomer Nafsho Notzer Darko. Mesilah is the road. The road of those who are righteous is Sur Mera, is to depart from all that is evil. Shomer Nafsho Notzer Darko. He who guards his way preserves his nafsho, his soul. In this pasuk, Mesilat Yesharim Sur Mera, the commentaries explain to us something which is perhaps known to all of you, that there are some individuals who by nature are very good. They're very sweet, they're very kind by nature. It is just that they're born with certain characteristics. They don't have a hard time struggling with anger. They don't have a hard time struggling with laziness, perhaps. Just, some people are just good by nature. Everyone has their strengths and their weaknesses. So Mesilat Yesharim, those who are Yesharim by nature, from birth, Sur Mira, they will have an easier time staying away from evil. Now they have their own challenges too. They have, of course, their ways of acquiring sechar, reward, by doing that which is difficult for them. Even if somebody were to be good by nature on his own, it does not mean that he will be greatly rewarded for it as someone else who is not good-natured by birth and works on himself. Because the rabbis tell us, Lefum tzara agra. One's reward, the reward that we get, the compensation in Olam HaEmet, is according to one's effort. The more difficult it was for someone to do something, to put on tefillin every morning, to go to a bet knesset because it's far away, to control his anger during some very challenging moments, he will be rewarded much more than he who was brought up in Me'ah She'arim, in Yerushalayim, and was not exposed to all the billboards that we have here, to all the challenges and temptations that we have in the city of angels, right? This is much more difficult. And if one preserves his sanctity and continues to be a righteous Jew in a more difficult situation, obviously he will be rewarded immensely. Nevertheless, Shlomo Melech tells us that it's just a fact that those who are good-natured by birth will stay away from evil, and that's good. And Shomer Nafsho Notzer Darko, he who has a harder time, because by nature he's not like that, he can still do it if he is interested in his nafsho. Person who is interested in his nefesh, Notzer Darko, he will be watchful of his ways. Now this has various meanings. We can apply it to smoking. One who really likes himself, who wants to stay healthy and live, will not smoke. After all of us know today that smoking is not good for your health. And, people are going to say, why are you picking on smoke? What about cholesterol? Well, cholesterol may not be good, but some people don't have a problem with it. They can eat all the cake and all the candy and all the chocolates and sweets, and nothing will happen to them, right? Because it has a little bit to do with the genes too. But it's an important point. If you like yourself, shomer nafsho, then you're going to watch your ways. Otherwise, one is committing suicide. Maybe not in one day, but over a couple years. You have to like yourself. But what he's also saying is that just because you're born with a certain weakness, it does not mean that there's no way out of it. Shomer nafsho, notzer darko. You could still do it. If you want to watch over yourself, you want to have a good life, you have to watch your ways. Even though it's not in your nature, it's still possible. In other words, don't come up with any excuses that it's too hard. Everyone has the ability, Hashem gives everyone the abilities to overcome his weaknesses. We may need a little bit help, but it is possible. That's one idea here in this pasuk. The other idea of Mesilat Yesharim Sur Mira is that the very first step before Chokhmah, we've been speaking about the value of Chokhmah, is Sur Mira, as the pasuk elsewhere says, Sur Mira V'aseh Tov. We first have to depart evil, stay away from that which is evil, and then embark on doing something that is good. So the first step before we acquire Chokhmah is what? Reshit Chokhmah, Yirat Hashem, which we've spoken about before. The fear of God, taking concrete steps towards acquiring Yirat Shamayim before we acquire the Chokhmah. And all those who go in this Mesilat Yesharim will be Sur Mira. They will stay away from Hata'im. Because what does a het do? A het creates a distance between one and God. It creates a partition. And those who don't want that distance, who don't want that partition, Shomer Nafsho Notzer Darko, in other words, he watches his ways. He wants to have an open communication with Hashem. He wants Hashem to listen to his prayers. So he's concerned about every het. Because the Hata'im put up partitions and they block the way. Otherwise, why do we go to tzaddikim? The reason why we go to tzaddikim is because they have a direct line with Hashem. Hashem listens to them. So Mesilat Yesharim Sur Mira, that's why they're very concerned about what they do. They try to stay away from doing anything that's wrong. On this very pasuk, Mesilat Yesharim Sur Mira, the commentaries also tell us that this fits in very well with what the Rambam says. The Rambam gives us some advice on how to deal with some weaknesses that one may have that are very difficult for him to control. Let's say someone is stingy by nature. How does he correct it? Now the Gaon of Vilna says about nature, about character, that it's impossible to uproot it completely, in its entirety. You were born with a certain inclination. You're not forced to be that way, but you're always going to be inclined to be that way. Just like an animal is inclined to do certain things, and if you rein him in, you have some degree of control. The human body is also an animal. You have to rein it. You're never going to be able to change this animal. You are what you are, but you can control yourself. That's the big difference. Nobody should ever tell their spouse, accept me the way I am. That's it, you're stuck with me. Even though it's true that you are what you are, but you don't have to be that way. You can control yourself. In other words, you can't change completely, but you can control yourself. So the Rambam says, if somebody has a problem, let's say stinginess, what should he do? Not to uproot it, but to control it. Says the only way to control it is you first have to go to the other extreme. In other words, give a lot of money for tzedakah. This guy has been having trouble giving anything. Give a lot of money for a month, and then you'll go back to the derech ha'emtza'it, to the middle way, because you don't want to go to any extreme in any mitzvah, in any midah perhaps. You don't want to go to the very, very extreme. You want to always choose the middle ground. But how do you get to the middle ground? You have to first go to the extreme, so you can be able to go back to the middle ground. Remember, somebody once approached my father, Rabbi, I have a very difficult time giving tzedakah. Just very difficult. And this is a man who has money. So my father says, could you give a quarter? I think he actually started off with a dime. Could you give a dime? A dime, Rabbi? What's the big deal of giving a dime? So give a dime. Just give a dime to the tzedakah. So he started giving dimes. After about 2-3 weeks, my father asked him, how are you doing? He says, great. Every day a dime except for Shabbat. Can you give a quarter? He says, yes. So start giving quarters. Rabbi, a quarter is not a big deal. So go ahead, just go give a quarter. He eventually was giving dollars every single day. It became a habit. Became second nature to him. It's a matter of getting used to it. Once you convince yourself of the importance of tzedakah, importance of any mitzvah, so you have to get used to it. And that is why consistency is so important. There's always some excuse not to do something. Don't get up this morning to the tefillah because you went to sleep last night late, and you need your 7 hours of sleep. You need it. It's true, you need some sleep. But how many times have you not had your 7 hours of sleep because you had to catch a plane that morning? You see, the Yetzer Hara works in many ways to stump the growth of an individual. He doesn't realize it. So Rambam says you have to fight. And how do you fight? You go to the other extreme. You acquire yourself a second nature. You go to the other extreme, and then you go back to the middle. Somebody who has anger, that's his problem. He's angry. Go to the other extreme. What's the other extreme? Anytime somebody makes you very, very upset, don't say anything, not even a word. Just be quiet and listen to the insults. That's the opposite. Eventually go back to the middle ground where you can talk back in a nice, gentleman way. It's very difficult. It's not easy. Same thing with laziness. Get up earlier than usual. And eventually go to the middle ground. So the Rambam is saying, Mesilat Yesharim Sur Merah, all the way to the very extreme. Mesilat could be here, the other extreme, or you can interpret Mesilat as being that if one stays away, if one goes to the opposite direction, eventually he will be on the right Mesilat. Either way, the idea is the same here, that in order to get to where we need to get, the middle ground, we first have to go to the other extreme. Be there for a while. I don't know if that works with losing weight. I still have to think about that. With losing weight, if you weigh over 285 pounds, you're afraid of getting to, you're almost there, you're almost 300 now. 300, is a whole different category. I think they call that obese, that may be even less than 300. But anyway, so you're concerned about getting there. What do you do now? You don't eat anything? I'm not sure if that's the best way. I have to speak to the experts. The problem is there are too many experts and too many books on diets. The best way to diet, from my experience, is to be active and not to eat too many snacks, And just to watch, of course, what you're eating. Don't make yourself hungry, because if you don't eat at all, you lose too much by just not eating. You'll just be hungry. The body has to burn it, has to burn all the calories, the excess calories. And there's other ways to lose weight. But anything they tell you, anything that they promise to you that it's going to happen in a week, I don't think it's so accurate. It takes more than a week to do it. But the most important rule in doing anything, in achieving any goal, remember, is consistency. Regardless of what you want to achieve, consistency, you have to have a strong desire, and you have had to convince yourself that this is what you want to do. If you're not completely convinced that this is the right thing to do, then you're going to easily give it up. You're going to come to the wedding, and you're going to see a great Viennese table, and you're going to say, okay, I'm starting on the diet tomorrow, and not today. See, that's what happens when people go away to hotels, and there's a big spread, I think they call it in English, a very large spread, and they say, okay, I'm pushing it off. Next pasuk, לפני שבר גאון ולפני כישלון גובה רוח. Here he translates it, pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. Gova ruach and gaon are very similar. They both mean arrogant. And ifnei shever means before a fall, before destruction. In other words, if somebody is about to collapse economically, what came beforehand many times was gaon, that he was arrogant. He was a show-off. And here, he's collapsing. In other words, Hashem is punishing him with shever, with collapse. But if nechi shalom gova ruach, and before somebody fails, it's very possible that he was arrogant. The simple understanding here is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes the gaftan, he who is arrogant, many, many times with kishalon, or with shever. What's the difference between shever and kishalon? I think the Gaon of Vilna says, shever, who gets shever? A gaon. Gaon is a person who is arrogant unto others, and because of that, the forces from the outside will bring about his downfall. Shever is from the outside, forces from the outside. Gova ruach is a person who is arrogant inside. He does not necessarily show it off. So therefore he will have a kishalon. He will fail on his own without forces from the outside. He will trip. He will fail. Regardless, they both have the same idea, the same consequence, that one who is arrogant at some point will fall. Another very significant point that is seen in this pasuk has to do with the generation before Mashiach. The Midrash says that the generation before Mashiach, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayiv'at, the 3 generations before Mashiach comes, the standard of living will rise. People will have a lot of money, more than all of history. You look back at history, you never have seen such a prosperous time. Unless, of course, you go to Sudan or Ethiopia, where people have always been miserable there. Talk about in second or first world countries in Europe, the United States, and even in Israel. You see a lot of prosperity. And unfortunately, there's something good about that too, but there's something not too good about it. Before Hashem wants to bring down a nation, He picks them up all the way to the top, and then He brings them down. Because when you're at the top and then you come down, you feel it much more. It's much more painful. So you know what happened in 1929 with the Depression? It was very, very bad. People who were making a lot of money, a lot of them threw themselves out the third-story, window, killed themselves because they couldn't take the pressure of having made a lot and lost a lot. If somebody only has $100 in his bank account, that's all he has, and he loses it all, it's not such a big deal. But if somebody has 100 million and he loses 100 million, right? Even if he lost 50 million, he's going to be he's going to feel terrible. He lost so much, but you still have 50 million. He doesn't see it that way. So the more one has, the greater position one is in, the more you are on the top, the harder it is, more painful. That is what is going to happen, unfortunately. Kadosh Baruch Hu brings a nation to the top, makes things very comfortable, and then all of a sudden everything collapses. And that's when people will feel the prophecy that the Gemara mentions, Ad shetichle peruta min hakis. En ben David ba'ad shetichle peruta min hakis. Ben David will come after people do not have anything in their pocket. In other words, it will be very difficult financial times. We hope that that's behind us already. Next pasuk. Tov shepal ruach et anavim mechalek shalal et geim. It is better to be of a humble spirit with the lowly than to divide the spoil with the proud. What he says over here is that when someone has a lot of money, he's better off spending his time with the humble, with the poor, than splitting or dividing up the spoils with those who are proud. Why? Because when one has a lot of money, it is an expression in English, the money can go to his head. In other words, it could lead to arrogance. So, in order for him to maintain his humbleness, what should he do? He should be around the poor. Live with the poor, befriend the poor, be with, not to live like them necessarily, but stay around with them, stick around with them, and in this way you will be able to maintain your humbleness. And there's a story of an individual who did just that. Rabbi Akiva one day went out to sell a pearl. He had a pearl. He went to sell it. And somebody in the Bet Midrash saw him. This individual in the Bet Midrash, everybody thought that he was a beggar, a poor man, because he dressed very, very simple. And he hung out with the poor people. And this beggar tells Rabbi Akiva, you know what, I'm going to buy it from you. Rabbi Akiva says, you're going to buy this pearl from me? He says, yeah, what do you care? I'm going to give you the money. Come to my house. Rabbi Akiva was never at this man's house. As soon as he approaches the house, from the outside it doesn't look like anything. But inside, all of a sudden he sees servants, he sees tremendous amount of luxury. Obviously this was a rich man. The man paid him, took the pearl, and asked the servants to grind it up, together with a few other pearls, for some medication. That's what the Midrash says. Rabbi Akiva did not understand what's going on. Then he gave Rabbi Akiva to eat a very good meal. And Rabbi Akiva says, what's going on over here? You're a rich man and you're dressing up like a beggar. You hang out with the poor people. Why are you doing this? Why don't you wear better clothes? Buy yourself nice things and hang around with the rich. He says, the reason why I do that is because I always want to remember where I belong. In other words, if chas v'shalom, something happens to me and I become poor, then I was with the poor all along. This is my place. I don't want to lose this place. If ever something happens to me that I lose the money, my place hasn't changed. This is my place. I always want to remember that. Number two, I don't want to become arrogant. And number three, the way I see things is that Hashem created all human beings alike. We're all His creation. Then why should I show off? Why should I stand out more than anybody else? And of course, Rabbi Akiva, upon hearing this, blessed the man and told him that what he was doing was the right thing. And obviously, this is not something that most rich people do, but it is an advisable thing to do, because the richer one gets, the more the Yetzer Hara overtakes him. There was once a young man who came to the Chafetz Chaim and asked for a blessing. So the Chafetz Chaim asked, what kind of a blessing do you want? That I should succeed in my business, that I should be a wealthy man. He says, why do you want to be wealthy? He says, Rabbi, I promise you that if I become wealthy, I will be able to open up a yeshiva and do many good things with you, with the money. So the rabbi says, okay, I'm going to bless you, but remember your promise. Okay? And they parted. A couple of years later, this individual did become rich, but he was a very stingy man. He didn't give any tzedakah. When he was poor, or when he did not have so much, he used to give some money. Now he stopped giving altogether. So anyway, this rich man hears that the Chafetz Chaim is arriving in town after a couple of years. So he rushes to see him. He approaches the Chafetz Chaim with tears in his eyes. Rabbi, can you help me? I'm sick. What do you mean you're sick? He says, yeah, I've become so stingy. I can't open up my hand. I can't even give a penny. But I don't understand, Rabbi. How did it happen to me? I used to be kind. I used to give tzedakah when I didn't have any money. Why can't I give any money now? Can you help me? So the Chafetz Chaim smiles at him and says, my dear student, you don't realize it. You thought that when you had no money, the Yetzer Hara was small, and when you would have more money, the Yetzer Hara would remain just as small. With the money that grew, the Yetzer Hara grew along with it. The Yetzer Hara does not stay the same. The Yetzer Hara does not stay the same, depending on one's level. When your finances grew, your Yetzer grew too, and that is why it became so much more difficult for you to give tzedakah. So it is quite common, unfortunately, that the more money a person has, the more chutzpah he has towards others, disrespect for tzaddikim, for chachamim, arrogance. He thinks he's a big shot. He becomes controlling, abusing, and does not necessarily share his wealth with others. It's a tremendous challenge. And the rabbis tell us that from the two challenges, poverty and wealth, wealth is the more difficult one, because one who is poor at least will be humble. There was even one rabbi who always used to pray that his descendants should always be poor. Could you imagine somebody praying that all his kids should be poor? Because in this way they will always be humble and not Khalila rebel against the Torah. Yes?
If somebody's a Talmid Chacham, whether they're rich or poor, they're going to be generally a big character. Why does Shlomo HaMelech divvy it up into wealthy on the one hand and poor on the other, instead of making the line of demarcation Talmid Chacham on the one hand versus someone who's not learning?
A Talmid Chacham is not a guarantee for Yirat Shamayim. When we describe somebody as a Talmid Chacham, is someone who's very knowledgeable in Torah. He might know a lot, but he may not be a good person. There's no guarantee. Hopefully, what the Torah the one learns will mold his character in the proper way. He will become God-fearing too. But a person has to work on himself. The Torah alone, the knowledge that one fills his head, is not enough. And arrogance is a very, very, very powerful negative trait that is very difficult for one to escape it, especially if the arrogance is brought about by money. He feels it's just like the rabbis, just like the Torah says. Money blinds. Remember that pasuk? That money bribes those who are smart. It doesn't say those who are not smart. Even those who are smart, even those who are tzaddikim. Money can bribe. Money is very powerful. It's like a poison. And anybody can fall. Almost anybody can fall with it. Therefore, same thing if we don't talk about bribes, just having money in your pocket, having lots of it, it makes a lot of people feel better, stronger, and it's all called gava. Yes.
Are you saying that wealth is the litmus test of arrogance? If that's the characteristic that's linked to arrogance?
No, it's not linked to arrogance. There's a lot of wealthy people who are not arrogant.
Correct.
Yeah, a lot of wealthy people who are not arrogant. Wealth leads very easily to arrogance. And what Shlomo HaMelech here says, and what the Torah says, is that in many cases, not in all, but in many cases, that will be one of the direct results of one's wealth and prosperity. He will become arrogant and he will forget his God. Torah says so. Vayishman Yeshurun Vayiv'at. He became fat and he rebelled. It's just, unfortunately, something that happens a lot. Mr. Rothschild, one of the first Rothschilds, was known to be just the opposite. And how did he do that? The way he succeeded, he tells his own story, is that he had a special room where he used to lock himself up every day for half an hour, and nobody knew what that room was all about. One rabbi was curious, and when he met him, he says, "You got to show me the room." On one condition, Mr. Rothschild says, "You don't disclose to anybody until after I die what you saw in this room." I said, "Oh, fine." He takes him to the room where not even the maid had any permission to enter. Opens up the room, and in the room he sees a coffin. Coffin? What's this coffin doing in this room? He says, come in, I want to give you a tour. Gives him a tour of the room. He sees a coffin, he sees some candles, he sees Tehillim, he sees a talit. He says, what's this? You gonna bury someone? Yeah, me. Every day, I lock myself up in this room, light candles, le'ilui nishmati, they're gonna say Tehillim for me, and when I leave this room, I'm a different man. It completely humbles me. And this is a very, very rich man, a millionaire. That's what he needed. He felt he needed that in order to control himself. So it's a very, very difficult challenge. Rabbi tells us this is a big challenge, and David HaMelech also says, don't give me no wealth, don't give me no poverty, just give me atrifeni lechem hoki, just give me some bread to eat. I don't want any extremes, because it's very challenging, it's very difficult. Alright, let's go on to the next pasuk. Maskil al davar yimtza tov uboteach b'Adonai ashrav. He who considers his words shall find good. And happy or fortunate is the one who trusts in Hashem. The simple meaning over here is maskil al davar, a person who thinks about something before he does it. As the rabbis tell us, ezu chacham haroet hanolad, who is smart, one who analyzes the consequences of his actions, does not act what's the word for it? Impulsively. That's the word I was thinking of. Precipitously, right? In other words, he considers all the options, all the consequences of his actions. Schar mitzvah keneged hefseda, as the rabbis tell us, what is he going to gain and what is he going to lose as far as mitzvot and averot. And in this way, yimtza tov, he will end up doing the right thing. He will find good. His results will be positive. However, Shlomo says there's something even better than that. Uvoteach b'Hashem ashrav, but he who trusts in Hashem is fortunate. That's even better. In other words, as much as you can think, you can't always be right. You can't always figure out what's the best thing to do. So you have to have bitachon b'Hashem that no matter what you do, that is what was meant to be. That is the right thing to do. As long as a person does things the right way, the kosher way, he does not have to worry about the results. I should have done this. And I love the example. I just love the example of real estate. I should have bought that house 2 years ago, because now it's $1.5 million. And back then, it was $750,000. How silly. What do you mean, how silly? What about somebody else, the one who bought it? Only you have to buy all the homes in the block? I should have not sold it then. I should have waited another year. I would have made more money. That's all silly. Boteach b'Hashem ashrav. He who trusts in Hashem, he's fortunate. In other words, he's happy, he's calm. He doesn't have to worry. I should have done this. I should have. You know how tempting it is in my situation right now. I'm building. I should have hired that guy. He would have done a better job. I should have done this. It would have been quicker. I should have done that. I would have, whatever happens, this is what was meant to be. This is min hashamayim. En adam nokefetz ba'om milemata lemkim lachrizim alav milemara. The rabbis tell us in the Gemara, a person does not bend his finger like this. Nothing happens to his finger unless they say so upstairs. You know what that means? Nothing happens to your finger. You know how sometimes we trip, we're going down the sidewalk, and sometimes it's not flat, it's not smooth, and we trip, or we bang our finger on the door, or we hit ourselves. All of that is in Hashemayim. Everything is in Hashemayim. Almost everything. We're going to soon see what's not. We're going to soon see that. So therefore, Ashrav, a person who trusts in Hashem, he's a fortunate man. He doesn't have any worries. He's always calm. He realizes he doesn't have control over everything. I want to share with you a story that you will understand what is bitachon v'Hashem. My grandfather, alav shalom, my father's father, was a man who was always happy. He had tremendous bitachon v'Hashem. He loved Am Yisrael. He loved Eretz Yisrael. Never had any worries, even though he was not a rich man. He just barely made it. He made it. He was fine. But sometimes there were tough moments where there was no money at all. And my grandmother, like most women, was concerned. What's going to be? We have to feed the kids. We have to dress them. And he would always rub his hands like this. He says, "Yeh tov, yeh tov." He would say in Yiddish. He said, "Zayin gut, don't worry about it. Everything will be okay." And he did it with a smile. He had no worries. It was not just a fake smile. He really meant it. Everything will be okay. But this was a very difficult time in Israel when, things were tough in Israel back then before Akamat HaMedina, before 1948. We're talking about sometime, I think it was in the mid-30s, or even during the World War II. Tough times in Israel. And he said everything will be okay. But how is everything going to be okay? You're going to see. Everything will be okay. Trust in Hashem. So he walked out the door. He went somewhere. And as he's going, wherever he was going, somebody approaches him, somebody that he never met before. He says, "Rabbi, we would like to hire you to give this class in this particular shul. And I want to give you ahead of time the money that is going to be coming to you. He says, you don't have to give it to me ahead of time. When I finish. He says, no, I want to give you the money ahead of time. So he thanked him very much. He looks at the money. It was the exact amount of money that he needed at that time. Exact amount of money. Now this is just such a small story and one example of countless stories. If you read books, and I encourage everybody to read books on the life of tzaddikim, to see how they lived a life of true bitachon b'Hashem, of simcha, of yirat shamayim, without having any worries whatsoever. This is the way to live. But unless one does not work on this bitachon, he's going to be tested day after day, and he's going to really think that he can outsmart the system. He's going to really think that there was a way that he could really do things better. This is all a lack of bitachon. Anytime a person complains about mundane things, not spiritual things, mundane things, it's usually a lack of bitachon. And that is why he says here, one who thinks out his ways is good, but the one who relies on Hashem is even better. That's the right attitude, because things may not always work out according to our plans. L'chacham lev yikare navon umetek sefatayim yosif lekach. The wise in the heart should be called prudent. Navon, man of understanding. Umetek sefatayim yosif lekach. And the sweetness of the lips increases learning. All right, that's the simple translation. What does that mean? It is very good for a person to become knowledgeable, for a person to be able to understand what he's learning, but it is even better if one can explain to others what he learned. Why? You only know something as good as you can explain it. If you're able to give it over to someone, then you have a better understanding of it. If one cannot give over to someone else what he knows, then he doesn't really know it well. So a Chacham Lev is called a Navon if he understands what he's talking about. Navon is more than a Chacham, because Navon takes the Chokhmah and analyzes it. Mevin davar mitoch davar. But Metek Sefatayim Yosif Lekach, one who has sweet lips, he's able to increase his knowledge. He's able to give it over unto others. That's even better. Mekor Chaim Sechel Be'alav Umusar Evelim Ivelet. Intelligence is the fountain of life. Umusar Evelim Ivelet. But the musar of the fools is ivelet, folly. This pasuk also has two interpretations. Mekor Chaim Sechel Ba'alav. HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave everybody Sechel. That is the fountain of life. What did he give us the Sechel for? With this Sechel, we should be able to figure out the ways of Hashem. We should be able to understand what our purpose in life is. However, some people misuse it. But in reality, that is what the Sechel is all about. The famous story with Eliyahu Navi and the fisherman. Eliyahu Navi meets up with the fisherman, gets into a conversation with him, and asks the fisherman, tell me, do you learn Torah? He says, no, why not? Hashem did not give me the brains to learn Torah. He says, really? What do you do for a living? He says, I make nets to catch fish. How do you make the nets that you catch fish? I go to the field and I chop down the flax, and then I tie it in such a way that, with knots and everything, to make the nets. Very complicated process of making this very sophisticated net. And Leonavi says, that's interesting. For that you have the brains and not to learn Torah? It's all an excuse. We all have excuses, many times excuses for not learning, for not doing the right thing. Hashem gave us the sechel, gave us the ability to learn. One does not have to be the greatest genius and learn everything by heart, but everybody has the capacity to learn a little bit. That is the Mekor Chaim, that is the fountain of life, if people would only realize it. But what happens? The Yetzer Hara keeps us always busy. Keeps us busy with the TV, with the internet, with silly things. And why does it keep us busy? So we should not stop to think what we need to do. That we have a sechel, that this sechel was given to us to analyze our tachlit in life. But to analyze the tachlit in life, you have to stop for a moment and think. But Yetzer Hara will make sure that you don't stop. You won't have a free moment. That is why he created theaters for all the goyim. They have what to do at night after they stop working. See, they work during the day, right? Then they go out to eat. Then they go out to see a movie. Then they have a drink. Then they go to sleep. And the same thing repeats itself every day. They're always busy. Do you know what would happen if people wouldn't be busy? They would rebel. They would rebel against the government. If a person has time to think, wait a minute, they're cheating me. They're taking away my money. And I've always said it, that especially in Muslim countries, and in Latin America too, the government tries to keep people not smart, not too smart. They kill all the intellectuals. They don't want them to think, because then they would realize what they're doing, that the government is against them, not for them. They don't want them to stop for a moment to think what is right and what is wrong, how we can fix the system. Same thing with the Yetzer Hara. That's what he tries to do. He doesn't want us to think. But we've been given a sechel to think, to be able to think, to know what to do with our time, what to do with our money, what life is all about. And that is a fountain of life. But Musar Evelim Ivelet. One meaning of Musar Evelim means the suffering that the Evelim, the fools, receive is through their folly. In other words, they bring upon themselves the Ivelet, because they don't use their sechel. They're fools. That is one meaning of Musar Evelim Ivelet. Another idea of Musar Evelim Ivelet is the Musar, the actual rebuke, the actual learning or use of the sechel of an individual who's an Evil is folly. What does that mean? A person can have sechel, but it could be sechel akum. It could be twisted. If all one wants is to satisfy his desires, then he will twist everything to basically get what he wants. So he's basically blind. He has sechel, but it's a blind sechel, because he's busy satisfying his desires. Next pasuk, Lev chacham yaskil pihu ve'al sefatav yosif lekach, similar to what we said before, that the heart of the wise teaches his mouth and adds learning to his lips. What that means is that what comes out of the mouth is what was first in the heart. So lev chacham, because we're talking about the lev of a chacham, what do you expect that should come out of his mouth? Something with sechel, yaskil pihu. Ve'al sefatav yosif lekach. And once he gives over everything that he has learned with his lips, he learns even more. In other words, from the heart it goes to the lips, and from the lips it goes back to the heart. Because when you start learning with your lips, as the rabbis tell us, one of the ways to remember what you learn is to say it out loud, or to teach it to others. So by teaching it to others, by repeating it to yourself, you will remember it, you will retain it better. So it comes out from the heart to the lips, it goes back from the lips to the heart. Now, once the Chacham begins to talk, that is when you realize how much Chokhmah there is. Before he begins to talk, you don't know it. And the Midrash says on this pasuk, Mashal lema davar domeh. What is this compared to? To a chavit, to a barrel that is full of gems. Somebody did not know that, and he went over to the barrel, took off the lid, and then he realized what was inside. Before the lid was removed, you didn't know what was in there. So the same thing here, before the Chacham began to speak, you didn't know what was in there, what was contained in him. So the rabbis tell us, had Shlomo Melech not written all that he wrote, we would not have known how great of a Chacham he is. All the Chokhmah that Shlomo had, and he had more than anybody else, is being revealed to us through his writing. Suf dvash imrei noam matok lanefesh umarpeh la'atzem. Pleasant words are like, here he translated, like a honeycomb. Matok lanefesh umarpeh la'atzem, sweet to the soul and health to the bones. This pasuk is referring to those who speak, who give speeches, pleasant words. These pleasant words can be sweet to the soul and to the body. In other words, it's a good thing to hear Divrei Torah, because they can be healthy to the body. One who has worries, high blood pressure, he wants to calm down. If he hears words of Torah that gladden the heart, they will be a healing to the atzim, to the bones, to the body. He will feel better. He will realize that what he was worried about, he should not worry about. What he's nervous about, he has no reason to be nervous. In other words, the words of the Torah can be a healing. And they can also be sweet to the nefesh, to the soul. The soul enjoys it. Another idea that the rabbis tell us in this pasuk is that when an individual is about to speak, he better prepare himself well, so that his words be pleasing. Otherwise, he should hold himself back and not talk. In other words, if somebody ever asks you to say a few words, don't say unless you really know what you're going to be saying and you've prepared yourself. Because since you have this opportunity to talk to people, to say some words, you really want to be clear about what you're going to say. I think attorneys pretty much hold of that. You don't just want to come to court unprepared. You really, especially if you're on the defense, you really have to have a strategy. You want to be convincing, whether it's to the judge or the jury. So you have to choose your words carefully. You have to plan out exactly what you're going to say. That's the idea here. Tzuf devash imre noam. It's sweet like honey. The words can be pleasant and can be very, very healthy to the body and to the soul if they're said in the right way. Yesh derech yashar lifnei ish v'achlita darchei mavet. There is a way which seems right to a man, but its end are the ways of death. We saw exactly the same pasuk more or less before, earlier in the Sefer, that there are sometimes ways that a person might think that this is good. Everything makes sense, it's right, it appears so to us, but we are biased. And we have to be very careful because because the end of this way, which appears to be okay, is really the way to death. Earlier on in the Sefer Mishlei, he was talking about simcha, v'schok, laughter and joy, which are good things, but if they're misused, they could lead to bad things. And that is what he meant over there, yesh derech yashar lifnei ish. An individual can think that there is something that is good, but if he does not use it properly, it could lead to the wrong things. Here, the reason he repeats it over here is because of the next pasuk. Because here he's talking about the hanaot, the various pleasures that one may seek. And because he may seek these pleasures, he might think that he's doing the right thing. That there's nothing wrong with them. But there's an expression that the rabbis use, yesh naval birshut haTorah. Naval birshut haTorah. How would you translate naval in English? Anybody know here? Naval. Naval is from the root nevela, disgusting. In other words, an individual who does disgusting things, he's a disgusting man, but he's doing it with permission of the Torah. How could that be? Because the Torah does not prohibit it.
Somebody overeats.
If somebody overeats, let's take a simple example. Is overeating anything wrong? Is there anything wrong with that except for the health? It's birshut Torah, it's permissible to eat, but it's naval. In other words, he's doing something disgusting with the permission of the Torah. There's all sorts of other examples, but I'd rather not mention them right now. Some other time maybe, of certain things that a person can do that are very much unacceptable, even though it's birshut Torah. The Torah allows him. It's not right. So an individual may be fooled by thinking that this is correct, it's okay for him to do something, but acharita darchei mavet, it leads to death. What's the connection here? The connection is to the following pasuk, which speaks about the hanaot, the desires of the body, as it says as follows: Nefesh amel amela lo ki akaf alav pihu. The worker's hunger works for him, for his mouth urges him on. All right. Nefesh amel, one who is working. Why is he working? Ki akaf alav pihu, because his mouth is forcing him. We have to eat. If we wouldn't have to eat, most people wouldn't work for the fun of it. Just for the fun of it. So, loosely translated, one's mouth is forcing one to work so he could be fed. Why is it this way? Because a person does not learn. If a person would learn Torah, he would realize that work is not about everything. There's something else other than working. Even though the saying in Hebrew is Avodai Hayenu, that our life is our work, or our work is our life. There's other things more important than work, but because one is forced in a way by his mouth, he continues to labor and toil. And some people work 16 hours a day because of this. They think they're going to make more money. And they don't see their family, they don't go to Shiurei Torah, and they toil and they work very, very hard. And all of this, ki akaf alav pihu, because the mouth is forcing him. If he would learn Torah, he would realize that the right thing to do is to be a normal individual, to work 8 hours a day, and spend some time with your family, go to minyan, go to a Shiurei Torah, and have a normal life. But there are some businesses which is very difficult. CPAs and lawyers, especially. Why? Because they're working on a case, and they have deadlines, and they can work into the middle of the night. And many of them get divorced because of that. Just like heart surgeons. They're called almost in any hour of the night, day. They don't have time. The wife doesn't see them. And that's too bad. It's sad that they chose this kind of a career. It is still possible. it is still possible with these careers to control yourself, but you have to have a tremendous amount of bitachon, that whatever is meant for you to make as of Rosh Hashanah, you're going to get regardless of how much you work. Then why put 16 hours if you can get the same money in 8 hours? For somebody to believe that, he has to have bitachon Hashem. Without bitachon, I can never convince anybody that he... A lot of people tell me, Rabbi, Shabbat is my best day. And they prove it to me. They take out the cash. See? $3,000 I made just in Shabbat. They don't realize it. The 6 months from now, they're going to have 3 root canals. The transmission of the car is going to go. And the main water line is going to burst. You know, and all the money that they made has no beracha. It's going to go to cover those expenses. They don't see it the day after Shabbat, and that's why they don't realize that the two are connected. But that's what happens. You have no beracha. There's no beracha in making whatever work one does on Shabbat. But if one does not have bitachon, he really thinks so, because he sees, this, people are making more money on Shabbat. So this is what's happening to one. Ki akaf alav piu. His mouth is forcing him to work. Rabbis ask on this pasuk, it is obvious that Adam le'amal yulad, as the pasuk says elsewhere, man was created to work, but I don't know for what kind of work. Physical work, or work with the mouth. So from the words ki akaf alav piu, Rabbi said we know that it means to work with our mouth. But what can we do with our mouth? To just talk or to learn Torah? So the rabbis tell us, we have another pasuk that says lo yamush sefer haTorah ze mipicha, and from that pasuk we learn, or we understand that the real meaning is that the work that one needs to do with his mouth is the work of the Torah. Not just to talk idly about anything, is to use his mouth for the Torah. So this pasuk is basically a pasuk that talks about the pursuit of pleasures, of work for the sake of work, not for anything else. What's forcing him is that he needs to eat. But how much does he need to eat? That's the question. I know someone who has 17 bathrooms in his house. Could you tell me why he needs 17 bathrooms? One for breakfast, one for lunch, one for dinner. That's 3. What is he going to do with the other ones? What? I don't know. So how much does a person need? If you make another $1 million, you're going to eat more steaks? How much money do you need? Yes.
You're putting a lot of kids through private schools, and you're paying tuitions, and you're sending them to summer camps.
Yeah.
That's $100,000 after tax.
That's good. Yeah, those are good things.
But you work 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And you stop. You can't make it.
Oh yes, you will. Because you have a mazal. And that mazal will determine how much money you make, not how many hours you work. So our minds are not trained like that. When you go to the outside world, you think, the more I work, the more money I make. But that's not true according to Judaism. In Judaism, we learn that Rosh Hashanah, Hashem decides how much money you will make. And if one has a tremendous amount of bitachon, tremendous, he can make in 1 hour his entire salary of the month. You know how?
No.
I'll tell you. Do you know people in the jewelry business?
Yes.
Do you know that somebody in the jewelry business can sell, if he's lucky, or if Hashem wants it, a 12-carat diamond, beautiful diamond, in 5 minutes, and his profit on that diamond was $25,000? You know these things happen, right? Yeah, they happen. There he made it. He doesn't have to work for the rest of the month if he chooses not to. It's just the nature of the business. You won't make that money in 1 hour with your clients, right? You won't even make half the money on 1 hour. To make that money, you need to work quite a few hours, right? So it's because of the nature of the job. But because it's feasible there, it's feasible by you too with whatever amounts you're used to making. That's all. It's just a matter of seeing it in the right perspective. It's not. It can happen if one has tremendous bitachon. Hashem can give him his parnasah. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you know what? Let's be partners. I only want to work 4 hours a day. You take care of my family too. I want to learn the rest of the day. I want to do tzedakah. I want to do chesed. Can you do it? That all my clients come to me during those 4 hours? Hashem says, of course. That's what happens in Israel today. You have a lot of young men. There's one young man who sells glasses in Me'as Sharim. He's only open from 5 to 8 in the evening. 5 to 8, 3 hours a day. He learns the whole day. Everybody comes to him during those 3 hours. And he has business. 3 hours a day. The shop is open only 3 hours. You want to get a pair of glasses, you're going to have to go between 5 and 8. It's a matter of bitachon v'Hashem. Alright, Ish Belial koreh re'av al sefatav ki esh tzaravet. A worthless man digs up evil, and his lips there is a kind of burning fire. Here we're talking about the opposite of a chacham, a wicked man who thinks of bad ideas, of evil ideas, and on his lips, ki esh tzaravet is like a burning fire, whereas the chacham thinks up of good things and speaks beautiful things. Look at the attitude of an evil man. He's always thinking of how to cheat people, how to do bad things, and because he thinks about these things, it also comes out, it surfaces on his lips too. His language is foul. Because the peh and the lev are connected. A perverse man sows quarrels, and in nirgan, he calls it a whisperer, but it's also a troublemaker. Separates close friends. You have individuals who all they know is how to create fights between people. Whether it's through sowing discord, whether it's by lashon hara, ish tapuchot is someone who always tries to turn things around, cause trouble, stir up trouble. In Hebrew it's called mecharcher riv, causing fights. That's why it's yishalach madon, causes fights between people. Yosif madon. No, in this case it's yishalach madon, right? V'nirgan mafrid aluv, and one who's a nirgan, who's always complaining about anything. Or also mecharcher riv, one who's causing people to fight. That's Ish Nargan, who's always mesachsech, causing people to fight each other. These two individuals, but especially the Nirgan Mafrid Aluf, he causes people to break up. He causes friends to break up, causes husband and wife to break up, and causes one to distance himself from Hashem. The word Aluf could either be your friend, your wife, or HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A Nirgan, or a Ish Tapuchot, they're very similar. One who is always stirring up trouble, making trouble, looking for a fight, looking or ways to say something negative about somebody else, or always complaining, always pointing out the negative. That's what a nirgan is. This is what they cause. They cause problems. They break up families. And rabbis tell us a nirgan, one who's always complaining and talking bad about people, mafrid aluf, does not even have friends. How can he keep a friend if he's always talking bad about people, always trying to make fights? Ish hamas yifater ehu ve'olicho b'derech lo tov. Then you have a violent man or a bad man who entices his neighbor and leads him in the way that is not good. Here he's telling us to be careful with those individuals who have gone astray and want to lead you astray. Why would they want to lead you astray? Because they're bad. They're not satisfied with the fact that they are going in the way they're going. They want to calm their conscience, and that is why they try to get people to believe in what they believe. Mesit mediach in the Torah, individuals who try to lead astray Jewish people. Why do they want to do that? Let them do what they're doing and mind their own business. They try to lead others astray because that is what makes them feel better. Stay away from these people. They're very dangerous. In other words, he will wink with his eyes and he will purse his lips and he brings evil to pass. In other words, he's planning on it, thinking about it, talking about it, all in order to entice you. So be careful from these individuals who are going astray, who are going in the wrong way, because they may come after you. The crown of glory in one's older years is found in the way of charity. And what that means is that one who has become old, that may be a milestone that he reached. But ultimately, what really crowns one in his older age is not his age itself. If one has good kids, if one has good grandchildren, if one has done tzedakah in his life, if one has good midot, and old age on top of that together, that is in a life of achievement. That is what is brought out and emphasized about Sarah that we just read in this week's parasha too. So old age by itself does